Welcome everyone to Vision MBS AIMS test series. We'll be doing AIMS May 2015 part 2 now. So from what we had left, we'll be following up with the question next. That's which of the following is not a major component of endodontic microflora pathogenic mechanism? Microbial interference, bacterial enzyme, exotoxin or endotoxin? Okay, whenever you have two opposing options like this, like for example, exotoxin, endotoxin, entirely opposite to each other, and sometimes like affinity, avidity, or reacts, does not react. So when you have two opposite questions like this, most of the instances, it's going to be one of the two, right? So you can easily rule out the other two options. We ruled out A and B in this. We have to choose between exotoxin and endotoxin. For all of you who are aware, exotoxin is released from a gram-positive microorganism releases the exotoxin, while a gram-negative microorganism releases the endotoxin. So between the two, if you talk about endodontic microflora, which is not a component of it, right? So when we study the pathogenicity of microflora in endodontics, you find that there are certain factors that play a role. So microbial interaction has a great influence on the ecology of microflora. They are all synergistic to each other. And for example, your Prevotella oralis does not establish in the root canals as a single infection. Monoinfection means single infection, whereas it dominates the endodontic microflora in the presence of other bacteria. There's got to be other organisms if Prevotella has to flourish. Similarly, endotoxin. Now I told you gram-negative organisms prevail high in numbers or dominate the endodontic flora. When there is death of these organisms in the apical root canal, it releases its lipopolysaccharides, which will initiate and sustain the apical periodontitis. Enzymes. Endodontic microorganisms produce a variety of enzymes. They're not directly toxic, but they will definitely help in the spread of microorganisms in the tissues. Example is your collagenase, hyaluronidase, fibrinolysis. Then there is microbial interference with the host defense. So these are the four components of microflora in the endodontics. Hence, you don't find exotoxin to be a component over here. And for most of you who may also have a doubt about dental caries and pulp and periapical pathology is kind of dominated by gram-positive, right? But endodontic microflora, when we talk about, let's say, root canal, and in case of the apical lesion, there is the predominance of gram-negative microorganisms, right? Hence, we find the endotoxin terminology over here. Next. Which periapical lesion requires unneeded endodontic therapy? Now, first, let's understand the question over here, which kind of seems a little complicated for us. Which periapical lesion requires unneeded? Basically, he's saying which of it ends up unnecessarily getting treated endodontically. So you need to find that lesion over here, which is unnecessarily treated. So we have a developmental cyst, residual cyst, radicular cyst, periapical fibrous dysplasia. Okay. Now, usually endodontic therapy is done for teeth which are non-vital. Either it is caries that spreads, either deep dental caries that's involving the pulp, or in case of a necrosed tooth, or in case of apical periodontitis where there is a widening of the PDL or non-vitality of the tooth. All of these are indications for endodontic treatment. Now, among these, which of the conditions will have or necessitate the endodontic therapy? Okay. In radicular cyst or residual cyst, in both these cases, you find that the tooth will be non-vital. Okay, and hence it will definitely require endodontic therapy. Then in case of periapical cyst, the option D, the periapical fibrous dysplasia, most commonly you will find that it is associated with the periapical radiolucency. Now, normally on X-ray, when you find periapical radiolucency, very quickly dentists assume to go ahead with root canal treatment for that tooth. Okay, so very frequently you find this periapical fibrous dysplasia, which is also referred to as periapical cemental dysplasia or PCD, it undergoing endodontic treatment, which is an unnecessary endodontic treatment, not required. Okay, because the tooth is associated with a vital pulp. If you do pulp testing on these teeth, you will find that the tooth is vital, but only on the basis of radiographic evidence it undergoes endodontic treatment. So this is an unnecessary form. So periapical dysplasia is your answer over here. Ideal electrode position for electric pulp testing on first molar is done on which side? So we have mesiobuccal cusp tip, distobuccal cusp tip, distobuccal surface, mesiobuccal surface. Okay, so these are basically asking you for which position or which ideal location on the tooth anatomy you would do an electric pulp testing. So the question asked is so here is on first molar. Okay, so answer is mesiobuccal cusp tip. That's the answer we go in for. Let's look at the explanation. Most desirable area for assessing the tooth in case of incisors is on the incisal edge. You have to place the tester tip on the incisal edge. It should be close to a pulp horn. And the reason for this is that you need to place the tip, electrode tip, close to an area which has high density of nerves. So wherever there is highest nerve density within the pulp, that is where you would be placing the electrode tip. For most anterior teeth, it would be on the incisal third. And in case of posterior teeth, you will do it on the middle third region of the posterior teeth. Okay, now why this? Why this location we're choosing? It's basically because in this region, you have high thickness of enamel and dentine overlying the pulp, right? So in some regions, wherever there is high amount of enamel and dentine overlying the pulp, the response may be limited, right? So you need to ensure you select an area which gives you closeness to the nerves. So incisal third of anterior teeth, middle third of the posterior teeth. So here, in case of first molar, you would go with the mesiobuccal cusp tip. And recent study has shown that the optimum site for placing an electrode on the molars is on the tip of the mesiobuccal cusp. I hope this is clear. Bacteria which adhere to tooth and cause caries is due to they produce extracellular polysaccharides or dextrins, ferment carbohydrates and release proteolytic enzymes, produce acids, increase the pH of saliva. So bacteria adhering to the tooth and causing caries is basically because of their ability to produce extracellular dextrins. And they need sucrose, right? Sucrose is the sugar which is required. And in an environment which is rich in sucrose, your Streptococcus mutans have an ability to polymerize sugars and produce these extracellular polysaccharides, which are called as dextrins or insoluble mutants, right? So dextrins and mutants are the two polysaccharides that they produce. This gelatinous matrix that is formed is the basis for which plaque is formed. And this plaque, it's a diffusion limiting barrier. So whenever there is limited diffusion, tremendous metabolic activity, both of these will be ideal conditions that will suit formation of caries. So all of this is an ideal environment wherein the tooth surface will get dissolved. An acidic environment in the presence of an anaerobic medium with the gelatinous matrix, all of it will be ideal requisite for dissolution of tooth structure. Material which acts as a pulpal medicament and thermal insulator is solution liner, suspension liner, cement liner, or cement base. You have basically, if you consider from Sturtevant, classification of liners and bases. How do we classify them? We classify liners into thin liners and thick liners. Okay. So we have thin and thick liners, and under the thin liners, you basically have two more. We have solution liners, which is nothing but varnishes. This is a very important classification, guys. You got to be thorough with this. So what do we have? We have solution liners and we have suspension liners. So this is a basic broad classification of liners, and apart from this, of course, you have bases. So what is the thickness of liners when we talk about? Liners are something which ranges from about 1,000 micrometers. Okay, this broad sense of thing is for liners. They range anywhere from 1 to 1,000. Anything more than this will be bases. Bases are, remember, 2 to 3 millimeters in diameter. Okay, up to from 1 micrometer to millimeter is liners. So we have classified liners into thin liners and thick liners. Thin liners as further solution and suspension. What are solution liners? Solution liners are nothing but varnishes. Remember, varnish which we place under an amalgam restoration, usually placed under a metallic restoration. What is the function of a varnish? The role of varnish is it has to be double coated. Remember that, always 2 or 3 coatings placed. It's a liquid, viscous liquid suspension liner, which you can do a paint on technique like with the help of a brush or something. And it's placed under a metallic restoration. And the main purpose of a varnish is to prevent leaching of materials. Like, for example, if you place amalgam, there's always a risk of mercury leaching into the tooth structure. Okay, so you want to prevent leaching of any of these restorative materials into the pulp. Hence, we will get that protection from varnish. Okay, that is a solution liner. It's thin in consistency, 2 to 50 micrometer. Then comes a suspension liner, which will be slightly thicker than solution varnish liners. And for this, you have examples of your zinc polycarboxylate or zinc oxide liners that you place. Okay. Then comes the thicker liners. These thicker liners are about 0.2 to 1 millimeter in thickness, and they are primarily used for pulp protection. Hence, we also call them as cement liners. All the cements that we use, like for example, your GIC or zinc polycarboxylate, zinc oxide, all of these which are used for dual protection, wherein they give thermal protection as well as help in pulp medication, will be called as the cement liners. Then these are the liners. We move on to base. Now base is given in an additional thickness. Like for example,